Could you talk a little bit more about what the emotional pressure is on the student athletes, Mr. Baker, Governor Baker?
Well, if you talk to, my first suggestion to all of you would be to talk to some of the kids who are on your campuses about this issue and ask them to show you some of the stuff that shows up in their phones, which we've seen. Or sit behind the bench at one of their contests and listen to the noise that's directed at them from people in the stands. Part of the reason we released the results of the data we collected from our previous engagements with championship data collection was to point out to people how aggressive and in some cases brutal the incoming a lot of these young people get.
So that's all pressure from bettors
Yes.
who want an outcome.
In fact,
and
we've
are holding them accountable
one of our
that outcome
one of our
is.
championships, we literally put 24/7 police protection around one of the teams because of the legitimacy of the threat that they received from a bettor when we showed it to local law enforcement.
And how much pressure is there on kids to participate in the sports betting, the athletes themselves?
They get a lot of pressure from their, this is something this might have all been before your time, thank God. But a big part of the abuse that's coming from the stands also involves classmates, schoolmates, friends, who literally talk to them in a way where they basically say, look, you're my friend. I'm not looking for you to lose a game. I just need you to miss the first 2 free throws. And
that's the prop bet.
And that's the prop bet.
Right.
And
Batamosi, you want to speak
Yeah, I
about
can
that?
comment on it. I think
Thanks.
the pressure comes, or one is an athlete succumbs to pressure when they're in need, and if they don't have the money to buy a meal or pay for gas, then they might succumb to that pressure.
They've got opportunity. They got the need that you mentioned.
Yeah. Now, some universities take better care of their athletes than others.
All right. I want to ask another question about marketing and the use of AI that you've all described. One of the questions I have that hasn't been a topic of this hearing is the concentration of the betting industry in 3 or 4 companies. And Senator Lee and I have sent a letter to the FDC really inquiring about whether there are antitrust issues here. And obviously, in any market, not just this one, competition's important. And one question I have is whether the more we allow for competition, some companies may have better practices than others. I don't know if that would be helpful or not. But I'd be interested, sir, in your comments on that.
Senator, I believe it goes to the need for minimum federal standards because some of these companies have become so large, and I specifically mentioned in my opening testimony DraftKings, who has recently purchased an artificial intelligence company.
Right, I heard that.
So what they have is the capacity not only to control markets, but to use the technology to target vulnerable customers with the most addictive forms of what's called micro betting.
So that, you get that capacity. That's an incredibly powerful marketing device because people are susceptible to that addiction, that micro targeting on the betting.
And that's why what the Safe Bet Act does is it specifically addresses, as a federal standard, these standards for in-game micro betting, so that while the Justice Department deals with issues such as competition, what from a public health perspective Congress can deal with is which forms of these bets should actually be permitted and which are simply too dangerous from a public health perspective, and that's what the Safe Bet Act would do, sir.
Senator, if I may, in some sense, arguing about what types of bets to limit and prohibit or allow ignores the fundamental nature of addiction, which is that it flourishes regardless of legalization or regulation, and which is why we support the GRID Act that would provide for the first ever federal support for states like Vermont to establish the kinds of prevention, treatment, and research we need to address this.
Mr. Rivak, thank you for that. I understood you wanted the states to be able to make the decisions, but it seems to me that it helps the state. I used to be a state legislator. If there are standards, you're not then arguing about exceptionalism where there's some self-interest at stake in the form of revenue. So why would that be a problem from your perspective?
Well, let me comment first on the harassment of student athletes. I share that concern. Everybody shares that concern. As Governor Baker understands, New Jersey affirmatively reached out to every Division I college in its state and made it very clear to them, if at any time a student comes to you, an athlete or any student, you have an affirmative duty to refer that matter to law enforcement, and this Assistant Attorney General has state troopers who are prepared to engage in investigations and use all the tools at our disposal if they are a gambler.
Well,
and go after them.
I don't mean to
Now-
interrupt, but I'll interrupt.
Go ahead.
Well, what Governor Baker said was that a lot of the harassment is around the prop betting.
That's gambling.
Right, but why wouldn't that help you, rather than have
Because-
all this after-the-fact investigation and protection of
Because
athletes?
here's the end result.
Just prohibit prop betting, so the
here's the
students
end
don't get
results.
hammered on that.
We have 10 states that have no gambling at all. We have 15 states that have bans against betting on in-state college events in their state, including their student athletes. We have the letter I reached out to and referred to. Many of these cases, I wish they had been referred to us to investigate and handle and treat as criminals. The response to that in New Jersey is very low and in many ways non-existent. I'm not saying harassment doesn't exist. I'm just saying the tools are there
Well, thank
to
you.
make
My
enforcement
time is
true.
up. Thank you very much.